From Conestoga College, welcome to the Talent Hub Alumni Podcast, your trusted gateway into the success stories of graduates turned industry experts. I'm your host, Kim Crackle, a student affairs professional with over 11 years of experience supporting our amazing students. Join me as we explore our guest's journey from academia to the professional world, empowering you, our listeners, to unlock your path to greatness. So settle in, relax, and get ready to be inspired. Hello, listeners. It's with great pleasure that I introduce today's podcast guest, Charlene Byfield, a graduate of Conestoga College's Law and Security Administration program. Charlene is currently the Deputy Warden with Correctional Services Canada Grand Valley Institution. As a recent mentor in the Helena Webb Mentorship Program, Charlene is changing the perspective of students by sharing her experiences working in corrections. Here's what her mentee had to say about being with Charlene. When I was first paired with the Deputy Warden of Grand Valley Institution, I wasn't sure how I felt about it because I knew I didn't want to become a correctional officer, and my view of corrections wasn't that positive based on all the negative encounters the media portrayed in regards to corrections. Charlene completely changed that for me. She introduced me to multiple positions within the corrections that are in my field of interest and highlighted all the positive programs and policies that the prison provides the inmates with. She challenged all my concerns about corrections and explained everything in detail. Now I want to get a job in corrections after graduating, and I will be forever grateful to Charlene for her time and effort. Charlene, welcome, and I have to tell you, as I read that out loud, I have goosebumps all over my arms, just because I think it's so incredible the impact that you made on that one student and changed their perspective for them.
Well, thank you, Kim. I am the same with that same perspective. When you sent that to me originally, I will say it gave me the goosebumps and a little tear because I love making difference. I love exposing the great organization that I work for, and this was just a prime example. Amazing.
All right, so let's get down to business. Let's start going through some of these questions that we have for you. And because, people who listen to this podcast will know I'm a bookworm. I want to know, what is your favorite book?
Okay. So this was an easy question for me. My favorite book is The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. This is a book who somebody gave it to me probably about 20 years ago, and I've read it a dozen times, but it really comes down to it's about an elderly man. He is a mechanic at an amusement park, and he accidentally dies. Not, crushing the story by telling you that, but it's about his journey through heaven. And he meets several people, and all of those people had an impact, or he had an impact on their lives. And as you read this story, once you meet one person and you're anxious to see who the next person is, it really gives you a perspective of sometimes the impacts were very little. Sometimes he didn't even know who those people were, but they had an impact on their lives and his lives to have the journey through where he needed to go to in his journey of death. So it was an impactful book for me, and I've referred it to many, and it's my favorite.
It's a book I read. I think I might have read it when it first came out, but now I need to go back to it. I've got this draw. I need to put it on my Kindle, and I need to reread it. And what an amazing tie-in to your love of the book because of the impact and the impact that you make on our students and with the women that you work with on a day-to-day basis. So getting into some of our first questions here, what brought you to study at Conestoga College? Why did you pick Conestoga to go to school?
Well, I love telling my career path story. I'm local Kitchener and graduated from high school. And at that time, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I applied to 3 universities, 5 colleges, hoping that I wouldn't get into some, and that would give my choice for me. But unfortunately, I got into everything, and it didn't make my outcome any easier in that decision making. So I decided to go to University of Waterloo. Being Kitchener, it's a great rated school. My parents were happy because it's more economical to stay in town. And after the first year, I wasn't really keen on the program. I was in a program with co-op opportunities, but it focused on some other topics that I wasn't really too keen on. And then after that, I decided to switch to a Bachelor of Arts for my second year. But still going through my second year, I felt that I didn't understand what I was going to do or have when I was done. I'm a very tangible person, and I needed to feel or understand what am I going to do physically. So after my second year, I decided to take a break. My parents weren't that happy. However, it was a decision that I needed to make. I was still here in Kitchener, but living on my own, and I decided to, just work. I was working two part-time jobs. And after about the 6 to 8 month mark, I realized this is not what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I got to figure it out. And then I went back to explore my school options. I started looking at the fast-tracking colleges, business college. I was always interested in law.
Okay.
And I then was looking at legal secretary. And then I went to Conestoga and I thought, I don't know, is a 2 or 3 year program what I want to do? Will I get in? Because I had the thoughts of also being out of school for a little bit would maybe be a deterrent. But I applied, closed my eyes, sent in that application, and I got accepted. And that time was about May, and I got September admission. So then I went into panic mode, and I thought I had to come up with tuition and whatnot, but I made it happen. And then I started in the Law and Security Administration program. And from there, I was able to focus and graduate a couple years later, and I'm a proud graduate of 1999.
Amazing. Charlene, one of the things that I think is really really fantastic about your story that I think will really resonate with our listeners is that you started thinking you were going to go in one direction, and then you took a break. And that's okay. And I know a lot of people think, just like you said, my parents might not be very happy with this decision. But sometimes you need to take that pause in order to really figure out what direction you want to go in and what area you want to study in. And, your 2 years that you did before, they're not lost. You gained something from learning in those 2 years. But
And as we go through the questions, and I could talk about it now, I actually did go back to university.
Okay.
So that's, again, continued on my journey of education and my career advancement.
Excellent. And we're going to come back to that. We're going to definitely circle back to that. I want to know a little bit more about what drew you to sort of the law and security administration. What piqued your interest about sort of that type of work?
Well, as I said, in high school, I was always interested in law. It was something that intrigued me. I got top marks in that course. After leaving university and knowing that I wanted something more hands-on, that's actually what led me from university to the college aspect. And I knew I was not, or feeling that university was not the best fit for me and my learning style. I felt college was a better fit for me. And then Conestoga was local, and I was here in Kitchener, and it's rated as a top college. So it had all the best at that time for me. And when I then got into the program, I knew very quickly it was the best right fit for me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I love when you talk about like the applied learning and the more hands-on. I mean, that's definitely something we pride ourselves on here at the school. So let's talk a little bit about your time when you were at Conestoga as a student. What are you the most proud of during your time at Conestoga?
I will say graduating.
That's a big thing.
Getting top marks and actually finishing, because although I love the program, knowing that I had left school and then gone back, I was a couple years older than the average student that was coming right out of high school. So that also brings some challenges as a mature student. So that was a huge accomplishment for me. But I'm also proud of some of the relationships that I built, because to this day, some friendships that I acquired during that time at school, I still have. And the support from the professors that I kept in touch with over the years.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that. Thinking still about a time when you were a student here at Conestoga, is there a moment or an experience that stands out, that's particularly meaningful to you, whether it was, something personally that happened to you while you were at school or academically or?
During my time or a couple years during that program, the head of the program at the time was Mr. Don Douglas. And he also taught criminology. And I felt at the time, he was, I would say, extremely hard on me, a couple of students in that class. And regardless if he saw me in the halls, in the cafeteria, he kind of, challenged you anywhere on campus. I figured if I got top marks in his class, he kind of would lighten up a bit. I got high 90s. And although I received great marks, he was still...
Sounds like he was ruthless.
He was still persistent. Now, Mr. Douglas, he, leading up to graduation now, so we know him for now 2 years. We know this is kind of his demeanor, and he is there to challenge us. And he came up to myself and my group of friends and said, he knew we had it in him or in us, and hinted at his pushing to make us better, and knew that he wanted for us to achieve the best we could. So, he was a great supporter and became that supporter for me over the years. Once I entered into corrections, he was always interested in my success. He invited me over the years to speak at his classes. So I, did that over different semesters with him. And he also came to the prison for tours with his classes and whatnot. But he always demonstrated how proud he was of me as a successful alumni from that program. And over this last year, it's sad to say, but he did pass away this last year. But I was very fortunate to have had him as a professor and really a cheerleader over those years, because it really did make a difference to still have that connection to Conestoga, and knowing that it stemmed from that time. Although at the time I resisted, but it was all for the good.
I think that's a good lesson, right? Like sometimes we think a professor might be challenging us because they, and I'm using air quotes here, like don't like us.
Yes.
But really, from your experience, it was somebody who knew the greatness that was in you.
Yes.
And wanted to do everything possible to bring out every sort of ounce of that.
Correct. Yeah.
Amazing. And I'm sorry, my sympathies that he's passed away, that important person in your life.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I had was, who has been one of your bigger supporters or mentors or role models? And I'm going to guess that maybe, Mr. Douglas was one of them for you.
He was, in regards to that expansion from school into my career. Like I said, he attended the institution on many occasions, and he also connected with some other students that had, made their way to Grand Valley Institution as well. And I really believe that, he supported and mentored wherever. If we had a question, we could still reach out, and vice versa. If he had questions, or if there's stuff in the news, he reached out just to say, how is it affecting the prison? And because he wanted the information to be relevant for his students in the class.
That's a sign of a great professor, one that wants to, it's one thing to, expect your students to consistently be learning and growing, but to know that he also wanted to be consistently finding out what are the new things that are happening, how are things affecting things?
Yes, and what's relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah. In regards to mentors, I've had different mentors over the years, depending on different positions I've been in as well. And those experience all have been great at supporting, guiding me, being open to questions when I need it. So it's really hard to pinpoint one person. I think it's kind of over the years that, yes. But when I first came into corrections, I did have my first mentor. And one of the things that, he taught me was you always want the people that you mentor to become more successful than you ever were. And that's how I've guided my career. So I know that I've demonstrated that even just recently in that mentorship program with my mentee to make sure that they learn, they can grow. And, when I'm done and retired, then I see their success.
I love that. I love that philosophy so much. It really demonstrates that you are there for them. It's not a you thing.
Yes.
It's a growth thing.
Yes.
Yeah. When you think of your career journey, what's something that that's happened to date that you sort of weren't expecting?
Well, from my kind of ending up in prison is that, right? Actually working in a prison. From when I left Conestoga, I, again, started applying for jobs and looking at what am I going to do. One of the things that I loved about the program, it gave us a variety of different law enforcement programs or opportunities and positions. So it went from customs to corrections, private investigation, you name it, under law enforcement, policing. It included everything.
Okay. So
from that, you were able to kind of rank what your interests were. I left that program thinking I wanted to work at the border or the airport under customs. And my lowest items on my, list were being a private investigator and working in a prison.
Funny how things turn out, right?
So from, graduating, I applied to different jobs. My first job that I came across was doing loss prevention, and it was through a private investigation firm. But I wanted to get out of, out on my own and start a new job. So I took that. It was in Mississauga. A lot of traveling, a lot of commuting, a lot of traffic. And then through that company, though, I did grow from loss prevention because then they approached me from the private investigation side of the department and asked because they had certain jobs that fit my I was young. I was able to go undercover and do different jobs. So I learned a lot making that transition and having that opportunity. However, you have to go to where the jobs are. So you spend a lot of time traveling away from home, overnights, surveillance in your car for hours on end. Great opportunity for learning. But what led me is when I did come back to Kitchener, I started seeing this building being built. And I then found out that it was the prison, it was corrections, and I applied. So, when I talk about what I didn't expect, it was that. It was applying for something, again, now lowest on my list, and it turning into such a great opportunity. I'm 23 years now in corrections. Wow. And had multiple opportunities and experiences, different positions. So if it wasn't for me being tired of the commute, I may have not. Like, it was based on location.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny how, the world takes you into certain directions that you never thought you'd be going in, right? And how the littlest thing, like you said, you're like, I'm tired of being on the 401.
Yes.
Right? And this is new. This is opening. And what an amazing experience to be with the prison from its sort of inception, I guess, from when it was built to now. You must have, you have seen so much, I'm sure, in the 23 years that you've been there.
Yes.
Can you share, other than the commute, some challenges or obstacles that you've encountered in pursuing your career, and talk a little bit about how maybe you've overcome them?
Yeah. As my 23-year, time at corrections, I have to say it has grown. It has become more diverse. And within my career, I did find when I first started, it was predominantly men-focused. Although I work at a women's institution, yes, we had a lot of women-centered, training and learning, and because it was a women's site. But when you're talking about attending meetings and participating in things like that, as a woman in an organization that's been around for hundreds of years, and it was predominantly men-focused, it does take a pause for you to take a look around. And although it has changed over the years, and, they have diverse hiring and for visible minorities and women and every and Indigenous people, but when it comes down to situations or like examples or circumstance, one that comes to mind. So each institution has an emergency response team.
Right.
Where, a group of people are specialized trained to go and respond in the most, severe situations. And for the women's team the women's prisons, it's all women's team.
Okay.
So I was on the emergency response team. I then developed to become the team leader of that team and an instructor of that team. But throughout those developments, I would have to attend training, which then was held in Kingston at the training college. And all the other teams were male teams. So now there was many trainings that I attended where I was the only woman in that classroom setting. And I had the feeling that, one, I had to prove, how to run with the big boys to feel accepted or to feel equal. And although it was challenging, I stepped up to the role.
Yep.
Right? And I knew my skill level brought me there because I was, competent. Some, of the guys that were in the training, of course, didn't hesitate. We were all people, and we were all, equally there. And then there was a few over the years that really felt that there was no place for women in that type of role. So you have to really overcome those situations. And that was back in 2005. Now, fast forward 10 years, I took on a role as the assistant warden of management services. Okay. And in that role, we had a construction project. So I was the head of organizing what was happening. It was a new building being built at Grand Valley. And we were dealing with an outside contractor. They came in. We had, biweekly meetings. And this gentleman kept coming in and talking to my male colleague, right? I'm the decision maker. I'm the one that is kind of overseeing and approving certain things. And he kept referring and gesturing to my male counterpart, who I supervised. So it just, and in both of those situations, I really had to step up. I had to, it actually made me grow because I had to demonstrate patience. I had to demonstrate strength and confidence to speak up for myself. And through speaking up, I also demonstrated the skill and ability and leadership that I have. So I also realized that you can't change everyone. And your reaction to such situations will obviously determine who you are. And that's really what I walked away. That's how I overcome that you can only do as much as you can do. And I made, for the meeting, for example, I made it clear that I am the decision maker. And yes, he's my colleague. And we're here together. And I'd appreciate if that was directed to me. He did change, and the meetings got better. But, from those situations, I've become a better leader and mentor to others going through those, adverse situations.
It's tough as a feminist to hear those types of stories because, you think like it's the 2000s,
yes.
But what I love that you've taken from that experience is not the being cynical about it and it hasn't jaded you. You've taken what I guess we call the positive, the growth from it, the learning from it. And you are, pushing that forward to the people that you are supervising and the people that you're working with and the people that you're mentoring and sharing like, this is an experience that I had and this is how, I dealt with it. And, if you're in something in a similar position, here are some ways that you can, that you can work around it and I'll support you.
Yes.
I love it. You alluded to this earlier in our conversation, but I want to hear a little bit about you. You said you went back to school?
Yes. So once I got into corrections, I now was focused on a new job after going to correctional training for 3 months. Once I applied, it did take about a year for me to, finally get in and start. And I always knew that my university journey was not done.
Okay.
Although my mom probably thought different. But I always knew when the time was right, I would be going back to university.
Okay.
So once I started in corrections, it was about a couple of years. I wanted to understand that job, get comfortable with the job, know my role. And then after, 2 years of being there, I then reapplied to University of Waterloo.
Okay.
And decided to go as a part-time distance ed student. Mm-hmm. And I knew now I could take my time. There was no rush. I was more focused on the path and the subjects that I liked and that I know I would be doing well with. And also, again, getting back to why I left, I was able to know what was going to be tangible. So now in the career I was in, I also looked at the other career opportunities or positions that required a university degree.
Okay.
And knew that if I wanted to, explore those opportunities, then that was my motivation. So, I took my time, and it was about 5 years where just taking part-time courses, in the fall and winter. Summer, I took a break, and I finished. So I got my Bachelor of Arts, Liberal Studies, and my focus was sociology with a legal studies minor.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I love that. So can you tell me a little bit about what maybe some of your future goals are? And, what your aspirations? I mean, you've been with the organization for 23 years.
Yes.
What's next?
Really, I take every day as a new day. I never imagined that when I started 23 years ago that I would now be the deputy warden. How I've advanced throughout my career and my time has been, that opportunity is here, or I look at possibly who was supervising me and then acquiring oh, you know what? I'd like to do that maybe one day. But I was never anyone that came in and said, one day I'm going to be, and fill in the box. So I love my role right now. I love the fact that I get opportunities to act and backfill over, the 23 years. But currently right now as deputy, I get to backfill and act in the warden's role from time to time. And, whether going into the warden's role is the next move for me or something else, and that's including retirement, whatever it is, I just want to be happy with whatever that choice is. And I enjoy the work that I do and the people that I impact and that I work with. But most importantly, I want to maintain a work-life balance, whatever that position or career looks like in the future.
I think that's so critical for, in particular, the role that you're in right now, because, you work in a not potentially, I think a very high stress area. Yes. Where, things aren't going bad every day, but the potential of something is always maybe looming a little bit over your shoulder. And you have to be able to take care of yourself. And you can't just absorb everything that's coming at you, so that work-life balance is, I think of my parents' generation, there's no work-life balance. What are you talking about? But it's so important to maintain happiness and to be energized. And I mean, and I can tell just talking to you, how passionate you are about, being with the prison and the impact that you're making and the support that you're providing these women. I know that about you. So I just think it's just incredible what you're doing.
Thank you.
Where do you think the future of, corrections is going to evolve in the next 5 years? Are prisons going to change? Are systems changing? Where do you predict? I mean, I know you don't have a magic ball, but...
Yes. Prisons have been around for hundreds of years, and they will continue to be here. Evolution of the technology, though, does present challenges.
Okay.
In regards to, the world's moving fast, internet, all of those accessibilities with how we do life, and corrections is kind of catching up to that.
Okay.
So when it talks about, the expansion of the college university degree programs, I think that also will be the industry that, continues to provide that diverse workforce, which we continue to need. Mm-hmm. And we'll get the best and the brightest to help us make those transitions, because just corrections as a whole, I always describe it as it's kind of a cat and mouse game, right? As staff, we, follow the policies and procedures, and as the inmates that we also, oversee, they're always going to try and get one step ahead, and it continues on that way.
Yeah. You had a mentor that you worked with in the fall, and I know you provided them with lots of really great support and ideas and advice. Could you share maybe some of that advice that you would give to students that may want to follow in your footsteps?
Sure. I think my first thing would be to say, don't turn down an opportunity just because you don't know how it's going to work out. As I've even talked about my career path and my education path, I've changed my mind, I feel like 1,000 times. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, and it's from Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, "Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase." Oh. So, much of my career success has been because I was willing to try new things. I learned on the job. I thought, I was able to think outside of the box. And, I believe that if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. So a lot of that growth was because I didn't know what was behind the door or beyond that staircase, but I just took a step out on the limb and said, well, it is what it is right now, and I'll try it. And if it doesn't work out tomorrow, I'll say, well, maybe this is not for me. And I think that's how I started my education path. I tried university. It wasn't for me, and I found some other path to go on.
I love that. That leap of faith almost, right?
Yes.
People are so scared, I think, to try because what if I fail? What if I hate it? Yes. And, something I try to tell people is finding out what you don't like is almost, if not more important than finding out what you do like.
That's exactly true. And I think that's how I found my path. I had the list of nope, absolutely not. And then really it comes down to, well, there's only this left, so let me go and try it, right? So, that's the big, I think, takeaway. One of the things that I did, talk to my mentee about was don't stop volunteering. So a lot of students will come in because it's required from the program, and they'll go, gung-ho, and they want to volunteer, and they take all efforts to do that because it's great on your resume. But it's really after you're done and you go into your career path, are you giving back to your community? Are you, learning? That is actually what gives richness and experience to your life. Since I've, finished school, I've coached basketball for youth. Right now, I participate in the Speakers Bureau for the Business and Education Partnership of Waterloo Region. So I love doing that because I'm able to talk about my career journey to high school students. You don't need anything special. You just talk about what led you to what you're doing now. And, I think back, if I had that impact, then maybe I wouldn't have gone to university. You never know. Yep. However, it's an easy volunteer experience to do something like that. And then just as last semester, I volunteered as being a mentor, right? So I really enjoy that, and I really want to stress that it doesn't stop just because somebody's asking you to do it as part of the program or to get your hours or credit.
That's a really great message. And the learning that you can do, even just the growth and the learning that you do from the volunteering, that's motivation to keep going. And I think one of the things that people need to remember about volunteering too is that you can volunteer in anything that piques your interest, right? You're interested. You love basketball, coach some basketball for some kids at the community center, or if you have children at your kids' school, or with anybody, right?
Yeah. And truly, that started because I was attending the basketball games watching my nephew at the time.
Okay.
And I was losing my mind on the on the side. And so the next year they were looking for, coaches and volunteers to help coaching. And my sister said, well, why don't you do it? Because some, a little bit more than some of the coaches that we've seen over the years. And I said, okay, I'll take a stab at it. And, it was the best decision that I made. And I've been doing it for several years. I have taken a break the last couple of years, but it was rewarding. You see the growth in the kids. And I took a lot of my managerial skills from work and, brought it to that. And it wasn't necessarily the kids, but it was managing the parents. But brought them all together because the kid is only successful from the parent as well. Right. So yeah, that was an enriched experience for me. But when we go back to kind of the advice, I have one more, advice-worthy thing that I would say, and I think it's the most important. It's stay true to yourself. Oh. When you look at the values and ethics that you hold, be it in school as a student, your new position and career, or even in volunteering, don't forget to self-reflect, which is a huge part of your great and long success in whatever career that you do. What you do has impact on others. And it brings me back to my favorite book, right? There's lots of lessons to be learned, and some is we did great in this, but then other times it might be a challenge. But if you lose sight of who you are, then really everything is lost. So that really it will surprise you how much impact you might have on others or the things that you do. And if you're not true to your values and ethics, then really it's not the same.
Charlene, I feel like you should be teaching a masterclass in giving advice to students as they prepare to graduate, because everything you've said, there's just so many beautiful sentiments that you've been able to share with us. And I really can't wait for this episode to air, that we can share this with all of our listeners. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you join us on the Talent Hub Alumni Podcast. And thank you so much again for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
We've reached the end of this episode of the Talent Hub Alumni Podcast. Thank you for listening. We appreciate your support and hope that this episode fills you with inspiration and serves as a catalyst for finding your passion and path. For resources and materials to help you propel your career and employment, head over to conestogac.on.ca/talent-hub. If you're a Conestoga grad or know one who has a great story, email us at talenthub@conestogac.on.ca. Links will be in our show notes. Please don't forget to subscribe, comment, and connect with us. We love hearing from our listeners and value your feedback. Remember, what you do here counts out there.